There seems to be a huge difference in the way that black conservatives and black liberals think about black progress in America. While many on the black left believe that blacks should have accommodations made for mistreatments of the past, black conservatives simply want to compete on an equal playing field with everyone else without any special accommodations, despite what has happened in the past. While the black left champions affirmative action plans, diversity hiring, ignoring bad behaviors in school classrooms, and relaxed laws for black criminals, black conservatives, on the other hand, want to live in a merit-based system that allows us to compete in an environment where criminals are apprehended and prosecuted with appropriate punishments for the crimes committed. Now, when approaching these subjects, we have to ask, why are there such huge differences between these two groups? It would seem that the desire to compete would be a desire that people should have when they feel confident in their abilities. A desire to be treated as true equals regardless of your background or race, to be judged based on the content of our character rather than on the color of our skin. To constantly ask for assistance, on the other hand, for an indefinite amount of time, suggests that people may have a bit of a complex about their abilities and skill levels. Now, I know the argument is most likely going to be that racism and a history of slavery have caused so many of these black problems. But listen, you might find it comforting to consider the past and racism as the cause of black problems. But others of us, we would be ecstatic if just this once you took a few moments to consider culture. When you have a strong desire to help people to do well in their lives, you also have to be willing to tell them some harsh truths. For example, loving parents don't point out their children's problems because they dislike their children. They do it because they love them dearly and want them to make changes for the better. A parent who ignores a child's problems is only setting that child up for failures later in life. The same thing applies to our adult friends, family, and those who happen to share our skin tones. I say all of that because I am about to say something that many black folks may not like. However, I'm saying it because I would love to see you all succeed. Many of you act in a manner that leads me to believe that you may have a slight inferiority complex. Of course, I like to define terms when I use them in videos, so let's get into the definition. An inferiority complex is an unrealistic feeling of general inadequacy caused by actual or supposed inferiority in one sphere, sometimes marked by aggressive behavior and compensation, or a neurotic condition resulting from various feelings of inferiority, such as derived from real or imagined physical or social inadequacy, and often manifested through overcompensation and excessive aggressiveness and domineering attitude, etc. Now, how does that definition apply to many on the black left? Just as I said in the intro, many blacks on the left seem to want the standards lowered for them because of historical disadvantages and perceived slights of the present. If not granted such preferential treatments, some aggressive or domineering behaviors may be observed. Now, inferiority complexes have multiple symptoms. Let's go over a few and see if they fit. Symptom number 1, constantly comparing yourself to others, but in your disfavor. The concept of white privilege shows us that many blacks are constantly comparing their lives to whites, and if whites are being said to be more privileged, well, then that can only mean that blacks are disfavored. Moreover, people are constantly bringing up disparities, for example, whereas blacks are earning less or are being locked up more frequently or are at the bottom disproportionately in this area or another. It's constantly a comparison that disfavors blacks for whatever reason. Symptom number 2, having a high sensitivity to criticism. This one shouldn't even need discussion. We've all heard about the hypersensitivity that some black folks display, or forget about hearing about it. Most of us have dealt with it up close and personal, from accusing teachers of racism for correcting their grammar to lashing out at whites or anyone who dares to be critical of blacks who simply break the law or act in an immoral fashion. Being critical of blacks who aren't taking more responsibility for their actions is a recipe for, at the very least, a heated debate, and at the worst, a physical altercation. Symptom number 3, perceiving others as a threat. Here's another symptom that shouldn't need much discussion. Many of these individuals have an interesting belief that white society has been making a concerted effort towards plotting against blacks. Many blacks, particularly those on the left, perceive whites and black conservatives as a threat. But it doesn't stop at whites or black conservatives. Hispanics, Jews, Asians, they've all also been thought of as threats at some point in time. Symptom number 4, trying to fit in and seeking attention. Trying to fit in isn't so cut and dry, but it still fits when you think about it. There's a reason why so many blacks vote Democrat. In fact, many of the black Democrats that I know spend very little time researching about politics. They simply take the word of their peers, parents, media, or elders. Many constantly bring up black solidarity and black unity. All of these things show that blacks are trying to fit in with one another. When someone black doesn't fit in, they can be attacked mercilessly, which puts pressure on everyone to fall in line. Just look at what happens to many black conservatives. Fitting in when you're black is assumed to be essential. And if not, you may find yourself in the midst of a Chappelle Show style racial draft trade.
We the black delegation, except the white delegations, offer draft Colin Powell on the condition that they also accept Condoleezza Rice as part of the deal.
Now, the attention seeking is much more obvious. When you think of fashion, style, and cool, it's hard not to imagine several black people. Black people seem to have created the concept of cool, and it makes sense as a symptom. Many people use clothing and cars to get attention. Even the Pan-Africanist Umar Johnson has said,
if I believe I'm worthless, that means I can only add value to myself by what I put on my body as opposed to what I put in it.
But it's not just about looking cool. Attention seeking can also be seen in protesting, in constantly playing the victim, and in public displays of unhappiness. Symptom number 5, blame. This is a big one. When I see blacks who've done well for themselves blaming whites and a racist system for all the blacks who haven't made it, it leaves me scratching my head. How is it that hard work and determination work for one group of black people, but it can't work for another group of black people? And why are you making excuses for others when you know that there was a formula to your success? It doesn't make sense. Blame, in this instance, makes you feel better about the group when you do not know how to think for yourself as an individual. This is where identity politics becomes problematic. Now, that's just 5 of the many symptoms that some blacks on the left seem to display. It should be noted that inferiority complexes are often subconscious and may not go recognized to those who have them. In 1957, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. explained the intricacies of the inferiority complex rather appropriately during his Overcoming an Inferiority Complex sermon at the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church. He pointed to 2 destructive ways which blacks have tried but failed to overcome their inferiority complexes. The first method Dr. King mentioned was about speaking badly of successful people. You know, kind of like how some blacks will ridicule anyone who made it and didn't do so in a manner that they deem as acceptable for blacks. You know, like working for the man and generally becoming a success working in a field outside of rap, sports, or entertainment. Or they harass blacks who choose to do well in school. That whole acting white thing. Dr. King noted, so often people find within other people belittling elements because they are trying to justify their sense of inadequacy and their inferior feelings. This is one of the ways that people use to overcome an inferiority complex. That too is a destructive way, he said. The second method King spoke of was what he called the smokescreen method. People try to overcome a sense of inferiority by giving the impression that they are superior. And you see people and you think they have a superiority complex. It isn't that. They have basically an inferiority complex, and they try to give the world the impression that they are really superior. So they boast all the time. They talk about how much they have. They talk about how much money they have, how much education they have, how much they can do. They brag and boast. They are cocky all the time. Now, they aren't superior, and they're really inferior, and they're trying to overcome their inferiority through the impression that they are superior. Now, isn't it interesting that Dr. King spoke of the inferiority complex back then and spoke of people pretending to be superior by way of bragging and boasting? Now, what genre of music came about with rhymes that were all about bragging and boasting, and that today has influenced fashion and the art of being cool in American life? Hip hop is that genre, and it's just another example of yet another symptom. But that's not all. Consider this. Blacks on the left have leveraged so-called racist incidents in order to get so-called racist companies to hire more blacks. However, studies have shown that racism is not why these companies do not have many black employees. Instead, in many situations, the evidence points towards there not being enough qualified black applicants. But you can't say that to blacks on the left without being called a racist or a coon. But just think for a minute. In situations like this, blacks are demanding to be given jobs, not based on merit, but based on their ability to gain sympathy by way of complaints and playing to an ample amount of white guilt. This screams inferiority complex. A Facebook friend once said to me, "You can't embrace decades of victimhood without also embracing the belief that your victimizer is in some way superior to you." Since that time, that quote has resided pinned to the top of my Twitter feed. It's a hard truth. If you think whites control blacks, then you must be of the belief that they have superiority in some way. If you constantly talk about what whites need to do for you, then you're basically saying that they have the ability to do more for you than you can do for yourself, which is like saying that you believe that they are superior. White businesses need to hire more blacks, you say. Whites need to let more blacks into college, you say. Until whites do right by us, we can't compete. They have to stop holding blacks back from getting a good education, you say. They're responsible for fixing the wage gap since they are preventing us from doing as well as they are doing. These types of black people cry victim, 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 all while asking that their victimizer fix their problems. What twisted kind of logic is that? The entire concept of white privilege is basically a statement of their superior abilities. They have a superior ability to get things done, and rather than name it white superiority, you call it white privilege. When are people going to wake up and realize that their desire to be victims is an admission of their inferiority complex? How about the leveraging of so-called racist incidents in order to get corporations to hire more blacks? As if the reason more blacks don't work for leftist corporations like Starbucks had anything to do with racism rather than the lack of applicants. I was listening to Larry Elder and I heard him say that there was someone organizing a boycott of Starbucks because after their apology and an entire day of racial sensitivity training following the case where two black men decided to have a meeting there without ordering, some blacks felt that the apology wasn't enough. They wanted Starbucks to do more. They wanted Starbucks to hire more black managers. But the problem with this is that it assumes that blacks want to work at Starbucks, one, and two, it assumes that Starbucks wasn't hiring blacks because they were racist. Now we know that's not the case. What this is blacks feeling bad because not enough of us have jobs. So because some of us feel inferior, we use situations like this for leverage to get more things that we should attain by working for it. But wait, there's more. When we hear black people claiming that black students need black teachers in order to do well, it shows again that inferiority complex. How so? Asians are kicking butt and taking names in education. Now, how many Asian teachers do you see in the public school systems? Whites are going to HBCUs and graduating at the top of their classes, getting class valedictorian and so on. Are you really going to feel comfortable arguing that blacks need black teachers? That's an inferiority complex. And when did speaking properly become equated with acting white? There's a correct way and an incorrect way to use the language. Why are you purposely pushing for blacks to speak it the wrong way? To make yourself feel better about having an inferior grasp of the language? That's the complex. Or how about when blacks say that we need different policies enacted just for us, as if policies that work for other races don't work for us? That seems like an inferiority complex to me. If you think that only blacks would suffer from voter ID laws, even though whites have more poor folks in rural areas, that's the complex. Softening of drug laws because blacks are disproportionately landing in prison for disproportionately committing crimes. That's an inferiority complex. Schools changing suspension policies because more black students are being suspended. Inferiority complex. It seems obvious to me that some blacks must have an inferiority complex if they wish to push for setting the bar lower for their race than for other races. And if you adamantly fight for those standards to stay lowered in order for you or others from your race to compete, it's an inferiority complex. Folks, black conservatives want to compete on an equal playing field. The black left wants a head start. We both may want a similar outcome, and that's great. But in order to get there, we have to eliminate some of the bad ideas that require us to be dependent on others. We have to realize that eliminating our feelings of inferiority doesn't have to be so complex. In fact, it's rather simple. Just consider culture. I'm Chi Brown. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider donating as little as $1 a month to my Patreon account or a one-time amount of your choice to my PayPal. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'm out.
No more Yaza Baza.